Hello there and welcome back to my channel. If you're an oldie, not an old person, just someone who's watched my videos before, I should probably come up with something new to say there. But if you're new here, my name is Katie and I do videos about motherhood, adoption, foster care, and just general lifestyle content, which pretty much means whatever I'm interested in the moment that I feel like talking about. But today's topic is a Q&A about foster care and adoption. I asked this question to my subscribers and you guys sent in a ton of great questions that I'm going to work through today. If you don't know, I am a foster and adoptive mom. So my youngest daughter, Brielle, we adopted back in 2019. She is 3 years old now. And then we were in the process of adopting a 6-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl. Also, I apologize in advance if the lighting changes during this video. I'm in front of a window, a large window in my bedroom, and the only corner of my bedroom that is clean. So I thought, might as well. Any other moms out there, if the rest of your house is clean, your bedroom is a wreck, or vice versa, right? Because that's how it is for me. If my room is clean, then the rest of my house is suffering. But if the rest of my house is clean, then my room is just terrible. I just can't balance it all. Maybe you can. I can't. Just looking at this list of Q&A questions, I have a feeling that I'm going to be dividing this into 2 videos. So that means if you're watching this when it first comes out, you will get the second half of the questions answered next week. I'm going to film it all today, but then just to kind of delay the release, because I don't know if people want to watch this crazy long video of just me talking. So I will divide that up. And I got so many great questions, so I'm just going to start from the top and just work my way down. And I'll stop at a natural place to cut it off. Okay, so my first question is from Jessica, and she asked for marriage advice that keeps things good while fostering. Okay, so I have a few things for that. First of all, I would say something that's really helped my husband and I, and we are both introverts, but I feel like this would be true even if you were an extrovert, is you want to plan for each spouse to get some time away on their own, whether that's once a week, or if you can't swing that, maybe like twice a month, that they can have a planned time where they either can go be alone in their room and not have to worry about the kids, or if they can go do like a hobby they enjoy, go spend time with other friends. I think that is really healthy to do for your spouse. And I think if you kind of word it with them like, hey, I want to be able to give you this break and also for me to be able to get this break, could we set up a schedule to make that happen? For my husband and I, we try to have it like once a week where we can each get out of the house and the others with the kids. Maybe even if it's like after the kids are in bed, but one parent is staying home with them. Figure out what works with your spouse, but those breaks can go a long way. Also, if you're married, I think it's really important to continue to have date nights, even in the midst of fostering and adopting, when I'll be honest, I know how hard it is to get childcare when your kids are in foster care. Everybody has to be fingerprinted and all that stuff, and it is hard to find people and to have so many people to choose from. If you're like us, we don't have family that lives near us. So we're relying on friends and college students we know and things like that to babysit our kids. So getting people fingerprinted is tough. So it's hard sometimes to find a babysitter. So here's what I'll say. Try to have a date night every week. Even if that date night is just literally after the kids go to bed, you order some food into your house and you just like sit and watch a movie and eat the food together. Or, you know, you can even, we've done this before, I actually did this last week. My husband went and got like Cheesecake Factory cake for us. And then while he was gone, like I lit candles and I set everything up and we got dressed up and we had like a candlelit dessert date at home after the kids went to bed. And you know what? It was actually more fun than sometimes when we go out. So be creative, come up with things you can do at home. I know a lot of people are staying home right now and they're not really having babysitters, so do what you can. Now, I do think it's important to get out of the house when you're able to, but if you can't do that, then definitely try to do something. Even if it's just like you're watching a movie together and making popcorn, just something different. Another thing I would say is find ways that you can do things for them or give them a break, because even if they're not necessarily reciprocating, it goes a long way in making them feel loved and to get to the point where maybe they will reciprocate that in the future. So for example, if you know your husband or your wife is really stressed out, maybe just say like, hey, today I'm gonna take care of like all the cleaning in the house. I just want you to be able to relax. Or, hey, like I will play with the kids this whole time and you can just be alone in the kitchen working on like cleaning up. It can be something like that where they're still getting something done, but maybe you can tell they need a little break from the kids. That can be a great way to do it. In addition, another way that I think is really important to take a break is to maybe go on a little weekend getaway together, maybe once a year or a couple times a year, whatever your budget and your babysitting situation allows. I think that can be really helpful. My husband and I recently went on a trip to Universal and in Florida, and we had an amazing time. It was just like an extended weekend, but even that short little bit away kept us so refreshed, and just we felt like we were on the same page and we were processing through things apart from our kids, and it was just wonderful. Highly recommend. And the last thing I will say is I think a lot of times foster and adoptive parents really question their own abilities and question if they're doing the right thing or if they're, you know, good enough. I know I struggle with that. I think at times my husband does too. And so I think it's really key to try to point out to your spouse the ways you see them being a good parent. Like maybe just mention like, hey, I think it's really cool how you took time when you were busy and you like played with our son with Legos or something like that. Just point out those good things. Or like, I thought you handled that situation really well. I know it was a hard situation with maybe like a discipline situation, but you handled it well and you were really kind and you were really direct or something. Like just being specific with that can really help build their confidence in a time where they may feel like they're not doing anything right. All right, next, Carmen asked, what to say to people who ask questions about your foster adoptive kids and their personal information. I'm summarizing here. This happens a lot. I think people are curious. I know there are a lot of like adoptive and foster parents who get really sick of this because it happens to them again and again. I think especially maybe foster parents who have fostered for a long time and they've just gotten so many way too personal questions where people really shouldn't be asking. I think it's good to kind of be patient with people who are asking questions like this. Oftentimes it's because they don't understand the situation and they want to show that they're interested, but it can come across like asking too much information, almost coming across like a little bit of a busybody. And I think it's just important to be like direct but kind with people like that. So one of my go-to lines is that we believe that our child's story is theirs to share, and so we don't want to share things that maybe they want to keep private or things that they want to be able to share when they're ready. And I do find it's hard for people to argue with that because, you know, you're like respecting your kid's privacy. I will say that I am guilty of oversharing our kid's story at times with like close family members or close friends who ask a question, and you know, I'm thinking like I'm really close with them, I really trust them, and so I say things that maybe like they're not going to do anything with that information, but it also wasn't something that was necessarily mine to share or that I needed to share. So I think just be aware. You may accidentally say too much, but it's always easier to play on the side of caution and share more later, because once you've shared something, you can't take that information back. And I do think I mentioned this in another video as well. I think in my boundaries video, which I'll link above because it's pretty helpful if you're in foster care and adoption. If you're in a situation where maybe someone else is babysitting your kid or watching your kid, spending time with them, there may be information that you need to share, but you don't need to share why. So let me give an example. Let's say that, I don't know, like a child had been sexually abused in the past, and maybe you're worried that they may act out sexually or they may do something inappropriate. Instead of saying that to someone, instead of saying, my child was sexually abused, you might say something like, hey, if you are watching my kid and there are other kids around, it's very important that they're supervised the entire time. They're not left in a room alone with another child. You don't, and they might ask why, but you do not have to share why. You just need to say it's for their safety because of things they've experienced in their past. That is a vague enough statement that it still implies that, you know, it's for a serious reason that they need to be supervised, but they don't need to know exactly what happened. Okay, next question is from Jenny. And she said, how old were you when you started the process? Because she mentioned she's like just about the minimum age in California, which I don't know what the minimum age is there. And she was worried this question was too personal, but don't worry, Jenny, it's not too personal. I don't care. I'm not really like sensitive about my age, although I am almost 30 and I know some people get a little sensitive about that, but I don't really mind that much. So when my husband and I started the adoption process, I believe that was in the winter or early spring of 2018. We were 26 years old, about to turn 27. Both of us were. So it wasn't that long ago, really. But we had been married at that point for, I think, 4 years, close to 5 years, because we got married when we were 22. And I will say, to those of you who are really young considering adoption, I think that's awesome. I think it's so cool that you have a heart for that already. But I do want to say some unsolicited advice. I felt like I was ready to adopt when I was like 23. Like I was researching it. I was super into the idea of it and I was like counting down the moments. I don't know. I just feel like I thought that when I adopted, I would just feel like complete or something, or that it was going to fulfill me in some way. And I do think that it is fulfilling. I think it is a really special and wonderful thing. But I also would say that I don't think there's a rush. Your life changes so much after you adopt. And in many ways, for the harder, I won't say for the worse, I will say for the harder. It is a lot more difficult. Life is a lot more difficult after adopting. And I try on this channel not to sugarcoat that at all. And that being said, I would never say, oh, if you're this age, don't adopt. I would just say, make sure that you've had the experiences you think are important to have, or that you have the stability you think is necessary before you adopt. Because looking back, I kind of can't imagine if I had adopted much sooner in my specific situation, because I needed to be more adjusted. My husband and I lived overseas for a couple years after we got married in the Dominican Republic. And then when we moved back, it was like, I thought I was ready to adopt right then, but then I went through like reverse culture shock for a while. And I don't think it would have been good for me at that point, adjusting to a new job, adjusting back to my country, to jump into, you know, adopting. So that is my little bit of unsolicited advice for you. Okay, the next question is from Ayalon. I'm really sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that name. But this person said they're from South Korea, which South Korea is beautiful. I would love to go there someday. I've had students from there before because I'm an ESL teacher. But I will say I'm not sure if you would be adopting there, because your question probably won't be relevant in that sense, but I'm going to answer it anyway because I think it's a good question. So it says, what's the difference between using a private agency and the county? So I'm going to caveat this with, if you're in the United States, this is my opinion. I personally think a private agency is better than going with the county for adoption. Now, if you're just doing foster care, I don't think it really makes that big of a difference. But if you're looking to solely adopt, I do think an agency is better. There are a few reasons why I think an agency is better. One is that you typically, at least in our experience, can be licensed much more quickly through an agency than through the county, because they just are not spread as thin as they are in the county. There's usually more consistent caseworkers. That's another reason why it is faster, and another reason why I think it is better. Our agency was run by 3 women who are all social workers, have all adopted before. They've been in the game for a long time. We don't have like high turnover. There's no turnover rates with their social workers. They've all been working there for a really long time. With the county, you can get a new caseworker a lot of different times, and it can just be a little bit hard. Another thing is, if you're looking to go the route we were going, which is like adopting waiting children, I think that going with an agency is pretty much the only way that you can do that. I don't want to say for sure that that's the only way, but I know that if you go through the county, a lot of people are not able to adopt waiting children. They make you foster and kind of do like foster to adopt. But if you're with an agency, sometimes they may specialize in that. Our agency specializes in it. And so for me, we actually started with a different agency and switched when we realized that that other agency was more on the foster care side, and we had kind of changed our minds to do more of like the adopting a waiting child route. I also think you get more support adopting with an agency. Now I say that, and I have never adopted through the county or done foster care through the county, But our agency has like a support group every Friday night. There's like a hotline you can call at any time if you're having like an emergency situation or you just don't know what to do with the situation with your foster child. I think you get a ton of support. Like I said, we've had the same caseworker for both of our adoptions. We really know her well. There's a relationship there. I just think there's more support. So if you're looking for that, I would say an agency may be worth it, even though I will say that agency adoptions cost money. Most states, if you adopt, I think almost every state, if you adopt after doing foster care and you're with the county, you don't have to pay anything for that adoption. If you use an agency, it's usually upwards of $5,000 per adoption. If you're going to adopt from foster care to get your home study, you have to pay for your home study and all that stuff. So like for us, I'll just be transparent here. It costs us $5,000 to adopt our youngest, and it will also cost us $5,000 when we finalize the adoption with our older two kids. So that is something to consider. But I may do a whole other video about finances and adoption because it's really possible for most families. We did not have very much money when we went into the whole adoption process, and we made it work. And we also did have help from other people at that time, but at this point, we definitely could make it work. And so I may do a video of just explaining all that in the future if you're interested. So if you are interested in that, let me know in the comments. All right, the next question is from a name I really recognize. I've seen her comment on things before. I believe it's pronounced Siel, S-I-E-L. So we've talked a few times, so I apologize, but we've never like said names out loud because it's on the internet. Internet friends, you know? So anyway, I'm gonna kind of read part of her question here. So she said, have you ever had to deal with friends or family members not taking your adoption seriously in terms of treating your adopted kids the same way they would treat your bio kids or kids who were adopted at birth? If so, how did you handle that? I think that's a really good question because that definitely could happen. I don't think that I've ever experienced truly like anyone in our family treating our kids differently because they were adopted or through foster care. I will say though that our kids are the first grandkids on both sides of a family. As of the time I'm filming this video, I now have a like 1.5-month-old niece. So she is now, you know, born, and we've been able to see how my husband's parents have interacted with her. I don't feel that it's any different. I feel like our kids have been fully accepted by both of our families, but I haven't experienced that. If they feel that way, they've kept it to themselves and they've hidden it. So that's good. Also, I would say this, if you do have that happen, I would try to have patience with that person because it could be for a different reason than what you think. Now, if they're being rude in front of your kid or saying things or doing things that are obviously like showing that kid that they don't belong in the family or they're not as much a part of the family, then definitely say something. Feel free to go like full on mama bear on those people. But I really think that in a lot of cases, it's more subtle than that, and it's not always even intentional on that person's part. The way that I think about it is like this. As a foster or adoptive parent, you've been through all the classes, all the training, you may have read books, you've watched YouTube videos like this, you've prepared yourself for what adoption is like. You may have even talked to other adoptive parents or adoptive families and you've seen them, and to you it's not this like foreign concept. But I will say that to a lot of people, adopting a kid is a foreign concept and it's something that they could never do, which I disagree because I think a lot of the people who say that would be great adoptive parents. They just don't realize it. But I do think there's something to be said about they haven't gone through that process of preparing to interact with kids like that or preparing to welcome a kid in their home like that. I think especially this goes for grandparents. This is a big thing for them as well. Sorry, my camera like shut off. It does that every so often when I've been talking too long, so it's a sign that I maybe need to speed this up a bit. The other part of your question that kind of stuck out to me was that you said when people like don't take it seriously. I will say that as a foster adoptive parent, especially one who has never had biological kids before, never been a parent before, it is very easy to feel like you're not a real parent. I have struggled with that a lot. I think the imposter syndrome is real. I think there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to be the absolute perfect parent for these kids because they didn't have that before, and you've taken them away from like birth mom and stuff, even though you didn't take them away. It's like, you know, you get the idea. I think there is that pressure to be perfect, and I think there's also a way that you maybe don't relate to other parents, like other parents who have had biological children. I will say that I oftentimes feel a little misunderstood by parents who have only had biological children, and I see the way that their family goes, and not to say that they just have it super easy, but I think it's a little more straightforward than what I'm going through as a foster adoptive parent with a kid who has all this background information that I wasn't there for, has all these experiences that I have no clue about yet. It is hard to relate sometimes, and it's hard to feel like I'm a real parent in the same way that they are. And they have more of a bond with their kids, and I don't have that intense of a bond yet because they haven't been with me that long and all of that. So I do think that some of that can maybe it can even feel like people are thinking that, when really it's just you feel that way because you're just still adjusting to the idea of like, I'm a parent and I don't feel like one, or I just became a parent so suddenly and I didn't have the pregnancy of getting ready and all that stuff. So I think that's very normal to feel that way. Unfortunately, you just have to keep pushing through and hope that eventually it feels more natural, which I promise it will. It went from feeling very unnatural with our daughter Brielle for about a year for me, until I really felt like I hit my stride and I was like, I'm her mom. I feel confident in that, and I feel like I'm her parent and I know what's best for her. So it does take time. All right, my next question is from Lee, I believe it's pronounced L-E-I, Lee. I don't know. I'm not sure. I know I've talked with her several times as well, though. She said, I have a big concern. It almost seems like one of the parents needs to stay home to make the adoption transition possible, such as bonding, grieving, etc. Is it even possible or recommended to adopt when both parents work? This is such a hard one for me because I don't ever want to discourage someone from adopting, because we need people to adopt. We need people who can be safe families, can be safe homes, and whether or not you work full-time, you can still provide a safe home and be a safe family for kids. So I don't ever want to discourage someone from adopting because they need both parents to work full-time. However, I will say this from my experience adopting a toddler. I think that if you're adopting a kid who's not school-aged, so they're, below kindergarten, they're not going to school, or if they're an infant even, I think it would be very helpful if one parent took an extended leave of absence from work, like a maternity leave, a paternity leave. At least one parent took that in order to stay home with the child to bond. The reason being is that for an infant or a toddler being adopted, they have no concept of what is going on to them. All they know is that some stranger is taking them and taking care of them now, and it can be very traumatic. And if you have multiple caregivers, if you have like a babysitter or they're going to a daycare, that can be very confusing and can kind of impede the bonding process. So my advice would be this: find a way that one parent can stay home, or maybe you can both take off a little bit of time and kind of tag team it, but maybe do that for like 3 to 4 months if you can get at least that time in order to bond. And I know that could be financially difficult, so maybe that means waiting a little longer and saving up some money so that you're able to take that time off. I'm not sure what job you have. I know that might not be possible in all situations, but if it is at all possible, I would look into it. I also know that with our daughter, who we adopted when she was she moved in with us when she was like 18 months old, there were a ton of families who wanted to adopt her because she was so young. And even though we were open to older kids, they chose us. And they told us that one of the deciding factors for why they chose us over other families, because we were willing to make it work for one parent to stay home with her full time. And so I will say, if you're looking to adopt a younger kid, you may not be chosen for a younger kid if you cannot have someone stay home. I'm not saying that happens in every situation. I'm just saying in our situation, they thought that would be in her best interest, and I think I fully agree with that. And if you can't take off that much work, it doesn't mean you can't adopt or that you won't be matched with a kid, but I do think maybe it'd be worth looking into being open to adopting a school-age kid. I know everyone thinks babies and toddlers are easier, but I'm here to tell you, as someone who adopted an 18-month-old and someone who's in the process of adopting a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, I think the older kids are easier. I know that's not the situation for everyone. I know it depends on their trauma and what they've been through, but I personally find it easier to deal with the trauma of my older kids because I know what's going on. I can talk to them. We can work through it. It's just, to me, it's easier. And I know that, like I said, I know that's not the case, but I do think a lot of people maybe romanticize the idea of adopting a really young kid and they think it's going to be so much easier or this or that, when in reality, maybe a school-age kid would work better. They'd be going to school anyway. If you were working, you know, it wouldn't matter quite as much. That's just something to consider. I'm always kind of pushing for people to adopt, like maybe a little older than they're willing to normally. So, all right, and I feel like this video has gotten long enough, so I'm going to answer one more short question and then I'm going to wrap this one up and then I will start the next one that will be up next week. So Mary Grace asks a nice simple question because a lot of these are a little bit deeper. This one I can answer pretty quickly. So it says, can you adopt if you live in an apartment? As far as I know, no matter where you're from, no matter what state or county you are from, you can adopt if you live in an apartment. You just need to have enough bedrooms to adopt or foster the amount of kids that you want to. So for example, if you live in an apartment, if you live in a studio apartment, no, they're not going to approve you for adoption. However, if you live in like a 2-bedroom apartment, yes, you could get approved. You could potentially even get approved for 2 kids if they were, you know, both boys or both girls. I know a lot of people think that their house has to be perfect or they have to live in the most ideal situation before they can foster adopt. To be honest, I even felt that way at the beginning. Now, I think for us it was the right decision to wait until we bought this house to foster and adopt, but I do think that for a lot of people, you could be living in an apartment for quite a few years and you can adopt and it'll be just fine. So your house does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be all set up in the exact and most amazing way. You can have a very simple living space and still adopt kids. So don't let that hold you back. Anyway, so that has been part 1 of my adoption and foster care Q&A. You guys asked so many great questions. Thank you so much. As always, if you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you would like to see more adoption content. Also, I'd love to know in the comments if there's any of these topics that I kind of touched on today that you would like a more in-depth video on. Tell me in the comments what you would enjoy because I'm kind of writing up my content calendar for the next couple months and I'd love to include some of your ideas. So let me know and I hope you have a great week. See you next Thursday.